Well, Peter Major and I usually speak for about half an hour a week, but I don't know if we're going to get through everything we need to this week. Financial results from Glencore, BHP, Goldfields Limited, DRD, Pan African Gold, Kumba, Jubilee, and the passing of two mining giants. Sure, Pete. It's always sad when somebody who has made such a big contribution to the mining industry departs. And this week we had two of them. The fact that Pan African Gold's results were released, I suppose, means we should be starting with Jan Nelson, who was, well, he was the man, wasn't he, at Pan African?
Absolutely, Alec. He's the creator. He put that thing together. He pretty much made it what it was. I think Quibus Lutz has done a really, really good job. And when I say really good job, Quibus Lutz has done what we want someone to do. Be very conservative. Be very measured. Don't try and do anything cute. And you can see the gold price does the rest. And the result is, I even wrote it down here. Yeah, you've had Pan African has beat every gold share I know this year. It's gone up 4.7 times. You know, nobody's done that. Anglo Gold's done 4 times, Newmont 3. But yes, Jan's the guy that put that little company together. It was listed in the UK way back then. I remember I was working for Shuttleworth and Jan kept bugging me, Pete, you got to have a look at this company, please. I know it's too small for you, blah, blah, blah. So I followed Jan really, really close for 20 years plus. I worked with him for years trying to get the O'Keefe copper mines going. And even though I had a heck of a head start, you can see how fast Jan put Copper 360 together. Maybe a little too fast, but it was tricky. You just couldn't get funding from hardly anywhere. Jan was a promoter extraordinaire, fun to be with. And I miss him terribly. And I'm shattered. I'm shocked. I thought he was beating this cancer. I saw him about a year ago. He looked tough, but he was so game. He says, I'm beating it. My count's coming down. I'm really, really hurt by this.
He was a gent that I also got to know, Pete. He invited me to Barberton to go and have a look at their operation not too long after they acquired it from Angloval. And I remember it so clearly being shown by him. It was called the Golden Bowl. It was where the old timers had taken out these very high grade gold nuggets that were in part of one of I think it was the Sheba mine. It was a whole bunch of little mines there, and that's going back more than 100 years. And he was very upbeat about what the future held because there were so many deposits that hadn't been discovered in those in the bluestone that was up there in those mountains. So fascinating guy, really passionate, great entrepreneur, good man, and a great loss to the industry and to you personally as a close friend. Clem Sunter, of course, has got the headlines because he's a futurist of international renown, but he was also a through and through mining man.
He was, Alec, but I don't think he started out that way. I don't remember when he started Anglo American, and when we first heard about him, he was an economist, and we had some dealings with him in the late 1980s. And then I forget when he was appointed head of the Anglo Gold Division, but it was a big surprise because he was actually non-mining. He wasn't a mining engineer. He's an economist. But we thought, well, Anglos knows what they're doing, and everybody liked Clem. He was sharp, quick-witted, put everybody at ease. You could talk to him about anything. He looked you directly in the eye, and you got the impression he was taking it in. He was going to do something about it. And it was notable that when we would go to Anglo American head office, 44 Main Street, that Clem brought all the mine managers, because Anglo Gold then probably had 9, 10 operating divisions. And so whatever question you asked, if it was related to one of those mines, Clem put the light in the question, said, yeah, tell Pete, Fred, tell Pete why your production's down or why your costs are up or what did you really do? Tell Rene Hochreiter this, Lloyd Pengelly, etc. And then you had drinks and snacks afterwards. So it was really different from the previous way that Anglo-American had their divisions present. And I think he was in over his head. I think it was a near impossible job. At that time, you had the transition to a new government. You had the unions that were unbridled. They were unheld back. A lot of radical acts were going on, sabotage left and right. And everybody just wanted a peaceful transition, in the country. So he was put in charge of their engine room at a very difficult time. I thought he did okay. I don't see that the gold division hurt by having him there. It was fine, I think. Anglos was a big company, great management on each of the mines, great management above him. So even though he was out of his league, out of his depth, I think he handled it pretty well.
But I guess pretty much anybody would have been out of their depth at that time. A very, very difficult job. But Clem actually joined Anglo American straight out of Oxford University. He met a girl, and the girl was the daughter of somebody who worked for Anglo in the UK. And that's how it came. He came from Britain, came to South Africa. Harry loved him, Harry Oppenheimer. I think he served as his PA, which Gavin really did at one stage as well. So died in the wool Anglo-American guy, if not, as you say, mining. But boy, did he make a contribution across a wide spectrum in South Africa. The whole futurist
That's right.
approach.
Yeah, his influence didn't just...
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say his influence wasn't just with Anglos. He's probably the most high-profile Anglos employee ever. Yeah, doing road trips, road shows. And again, that's when the country is going through a transition. And boy, most people at Anglo-American were afraid to even speak to the press, even about a company result. And here's Clem Sunter saying, hey, if the country takes this low road, it's doomsday for all of us. If the new government will do A, B, and C, we'll be on the high road. And I think Anglos gave him free rein to do that. That was their contribution to the transition to the new South Africa. And he was the perfect guy to do it. He was so diplomatic, so intelligent, quick, witty, easy to approach. He was the perfect person to do it.
And a reminder, as we also know from Warren Buffett, that a joke or a smile or a little bit of humor goes a long way in getting difficult issues across. It's been a big week for financial results. Let's start with the big two, Glencore and BHP. What jumped out at you from those two?
Well, the Glencore earnings were down about 6%. I don't think it affected the share price at all. I didn't find any specific reason why. I haven't looked through their results that thoroughly, Alec. They were down on production on most of their divisions except for copper. But copper, it was low so bad the first half of the year. I think they did about 250,000 tons the first half. They did 500,000 tons the second half. But I saw coal was down, zinc was down. So I think it was pretty much volumes were down in most of their divisions, and copper had just recovered to where it hadn't really recovered. 750,000 tons is down from the planned 880. So again, it wasn't a train smash because the metal prices were roaring up. And I think it survived the breakup with the proposed merger with Rio's pretty well. A lot of people thought, oh, this isn't going through. Both share prices are going to drop. Well, hell, a few days later, you'd never know they were talking. And maybe that's good news. I think it's good news they didn't get together. I like seeing more and different mining companies. And Glencore's a great cyclical. It's almost like De Beers. You can follow it on a sine wave. And they've got so many divisions. And the marketing trading bit, I always thought that provided something different instead of just a mining company that was totally relying on the metal prices. With trading, there's always potential to make money, whether the market's going up or down. And it's a counterbalance. Glencore is actually more diversified now than Rio's and Billiton and Anglo's put together. So it's at an all-time high. But it's, the only reason I mention it's at an all-time high because it's virtually 5 cents higher than when it was listed 10 years ago. So is that the sign of a cyclical? It's exactly where it was 10 years ago. But it's up more than double what it was a year and a half ago.
Yeah. What was interesting was with both Glencore and BHP is this drive to copper. It's almost like copper is the new gold or the new platinum. It's everybody wants copper. It's the mining sector's equivalent of artificial intelligence on the tech side, I guess.
No, you're exactly right. The exploration spend, the mergers and acquisition spend, it's all gold first, and copper is increasingly a tight second. Gold and copper have always been the two most popular, but you're right. It's gone from prince to king now, Alec. And I think BHP, it showed copper was actually more than its iron ore. And I think Rio Tinto is virtually the same. Copper's now eclipsed everything else. And it's the last thing any of these companies are going to get rid of. They get rid of nickel. They might get rid of zinc or some tantalum or columbite. But boy, nobody's thinking of getting rid of copper. And you've even got diamond companies now switching to copper exploration. Yeah. And I don't know how much is hype and how much is genuine. It's a great price here. It's not crazy. Copper has been much higher before in real terms, much higher, but it's out of a standard deviation. It's a cyclical metal and it's out of major standard deviation. So buyer beware. And if people are buying copper companies here, they're going to be pretty highly priced, highly valued.
It's a very good rider that you've brought in there, because we've also been talking about Jubilee. And Jubilee is a company that moved out of chrome and into copper. And this is its first set of financial results out today from the real focused copper operations in Zambia. Are we also right to be a little suspicious or a little bit cautious about this one as well?
I think so, Alec. I confess, I haven't seen Jubilee's results. I've been really, really busy, and I didn't know the results came out. This isn't my full-time job covering companies, and I've had a peripheral look at most of the other ones we're talking about. But Jubilee, to me, it has the potential of being the Pan-African of copper producers, because it's got a lot of cylinders that they've been working on, and Pan-Africa exemplifies it. This is a V8 that's probably up to close to 5, maybe 6 cylinders running with another 2 to go. And that's why, relative to the gold price, Pan-African is at an all-time high. Goldfields, Durban Deep, they're where they were 4, 5, 6 months ago relative to the gold price. Harmony is where it was a year ago. But Pan-African, it continues to go up, because even if that gold price comes off gradually, its production increase is going to pass that up. And that's the sign of a great share. That's the sign of a great investment. It's in the right commodity, but it's got all these cylinders ready to fire. Maybe I'm bragging up Jubilee too much, but my brief overview of it, and I've been following it for 10 years, is they're putting effort and time in this tailings dam. They're putting effort and time into this recovery circuit, effort and time into this rock dump, effort and time into this mine. So, yeah, it's a V8 in the making. It's probably only running on 2.5 cylinders now, but at this metal price, it's going to get up to 4 cylinders quick. I'm going to watch it a lot closer, and I'm going to study it much more thoroughly. I think this is an opportunity to get in without overpaying.
So a big recommendation then for us to do our homework for the Biz News Tribe, to go and pull out those Jubilee results, have a close look at the annual report, look at what their strategy is. But so far, they seem to have done the right call by moving out of chrome and moving into copper.
Yeah. And do I say they're in the right locale? They're concentrating in Zambia. Well, Zambia and DRC are nirvana now, right? Isn't it amazing? They're getting tens of billions of dollars. By my calculation, the DRC now produces more metal in dollar terms than South Africa. And remember, we were the Leviathan of the continent, because we had copper, zinc, lead, gold, platinum, heavy mineral sands, diamond, manganese, phosphate, fluorspar. We've got the whole spectrum, and I come up with about $50 billion. I think the DRC is now $53 billion. So even though that country is in disarray, they're fighting terrorists, revolutionaries on their eastern border, the West is piling in there, and their metal production now exceeds ours because it's a growth country, it's a growth industry. So is Zambia.
Well, you've got to wonder how long it's going to be before Zambia starts challenging South Africa in those global figures, because H.H. Ishilema has been a complete breath of fresh air for the Zambian economy. He is very business friendly, and you just wonder if he'd been born South African and had become president here rather than being president in Zambia, what could have happened in this country. But is that something that the international community is paying attention to? In other words, you've got a business-friendly president in Zambia, and he seems quite secure.
Without a doubt. And I think you can see how the world, and definitely the business section of the world, is really supporting both those presidents. You know, they're helping rebuild the power plants. They're putting in railroads. They're talking and interacting. And the presidents responded positively. You know, the Zambian president ruled out, we're not going to do some kind of BEE here. We're not going to tamper with the royalties just because we got a boom in copper right now. We want to exude stability. We want to show people what our rules were a few years ago still apply and that we're business friendly. So both those presidents are making a real effort to walk the talk. And they're being rewarded by a lot of assistance. You know, the United States, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, you know, they're going into both those countries with money, real money. And so what would we do if we had that president? The first thing I would think, Alec, would he be sabotaged? Because the Zambian president, he's got a lot of corruption and dead wood underneath him, and he's had to tread very lightly there. He didn't have a big support base. He'd run for election, 5 times before he won. So he's juggling people under him, but each day and week he's there, he's cementing in his authority more and more. And we know our poor president, he is dealing with a lot of factions in the ANC. He's dealing with a lot of factions in the GNU. He's dealing with other fractious entities that aren't in the GNU, but they are in government. So hate to say poor Cyril, but he doesn't have an easy job juggling all these factions. But I worry that what he and Gwede say looks like they're doubling down on our negative mining legislation instead of loosening up.
Well, we do know that if we want to have part of the Zambian story, Jubilee is sitting there and an appealing valuation, as you mentioned. You also spoke about the late Jan Nelson's company, Pan-African Gold. What was your take on their results? And given that it's been the best performing gold stock, is it still something that we can look at?
It is over the others because it's got a couple cylinders left to kick in. Remember, it's a gold share. Its gas tank is full of gold. If the gold price goes down, it's going to feel the effect. If the gold price goes down very fast, that will cancel out their production increase. If the gold price just goes flat, Pan-African should continue to go up at a more measured pace. But it's just the fuel is burning. And in fact, I won't call it gold. I'll call it nitro right now. You know, it's not as stable as gasoline. But yes, I know Rene Hochreiter is bragging up Durban Deep because he says Durban Deep is going to add another 50,000 ounces in the next 3 years. Well, if you're producing 150,000 ounces now and you're going to add another 50, 33%, that also is kicking in another cylinder. That also will weather the storm if the gold price levels off. But Pan-African seems to have 3 more cylinders to kick in. Durban Deep has 1. Rising costs are the biggest worry here, starting with Goldfields. Everybody's got double-digit costs. I think Goldfields are 15, 16% up. You saw management costs were 40% up. Across the board, it's the cost increases. That's why if gold goes flat, that means 0% increase. Well, cost increases now have a momentum and they're double digits. But yeah, Pan-African's got the best growth story ahead of it of all the gold shares I've seen.
Even now.
Growth in production.
You mentioned Goldfields. They do have a South African interest still through South Deep. Your thoughts on the results? Again, just to hand. They've only been released this morning.
Yeah, I thought South Deep was pretty good. I always look at it first because it was such a marvel of engineering. You know, they were trying a lot of things that had never been done. They've got a hoist that goes down 3 kilometers in one drop. And we've heard about the problems that causes with the ropes and some of the guides. But they're getting on with it. They're using large trackless equipment 3 kilometers underground. And what kind of rock mechanic problems? Backfill. But their grade is averaging 5 grams a ton. We know it's a rich ore body. And if you're going to average 5 grams a ton with large scale trackless equipment, that's not bad. They're producing 300,000 ounces a year. I think people need to remember the original Western Areas actually was touching 700,000 ounces a year in its heyday. So they've got a long ways to go from what they originally thought they could do. But at this gold price, they're making a ton of money. It's about 15% of Goldfields' revenue production. But Goldfields is juggling a V8 at this time, Alec, and their production increase is almost non-existent. They're doing about 2.5 million ounces a year, and it's almost as hard for them to just keep doing that as it is for another gold producer to probably add. Look, Anglo Gold's got the same problem. Harmony's got the same problem. You know, and that's why their share prices are lagging this gold price. That's why companies like Durban Deep and Pan-African are beating them, because the market can foresee they will increase production going forward.
It's a very good point that often is lost amongst investors. Before we finish off on the results stories, Kumba, iron ore. It was interesting for me to contrast the share price performance in the last year. Whereas Goldfields, for instance, is up 150% in the last year, Kumba is down, slightly down, but still down. Now, this despite a improvement in their production and generally a resilient set of numbers. Why is that the case, Pete? Why have people switched off from iron ore and indeed from Kumba?
Let's talk. This is Forrest Gump now, right? The iron ore price is still coming down. It's currently at $100, and that's kind of a magic target. Everybody's afraid if it falls below 100, it can make rapid progress down to 90. So we've had magnificent iron ore prices for the majority of the last 10, 15 years, higher than anybody ever forecast or ever dreamt. But we've seen up in Ghana, big iron ore production is ramping up there. And maybe it's only going to be 30, 40 million tons this year, but it's going to be 60 next year. We see China is leveling off, this massive, huge, what was it, 1 billion tons a year that they were importing in iron ore, 1 billion tons. Well, they don't need to import that much. And they are downsizing their local iron ore and continuing with the imports because it's higher grade. And they don't have to burn so much coal and electricity on lower grade ore. They don't have so much waste. They don't have to add other. But yeah, I literally think it's that simple, Alec. The iron ore price is just slowly working its way down. And so the market looks ahead 6 to 12 months without a doubt. And the market doesn't see the iron ore price staying above 100. So holders of Kumba are going to get nice dividends. They're making great margins here. And with Transnet, they should improve their volume, and that volume will help a bit, but it's a race. Is the volume going to rise up faster than the iron ore price is going to go down? And then remember, we're on a very strong rand now at 16-1. So if Kumba can just ramp up the volume to what it's capable of, if Transnet does the same, what it's capable of, and that rand depreciates 5 or 10%, that will help the share price. But it's not a growth story, not a real growth story. It's a recovery story.
So we had a whole bunch of companies reporting this week. What was your pick of the bunch?
You mean a
What jumps
positive
out at
pick?
you? Positive.
Man, it's Pan-African or Durban Deep, because both those are run by someone who's been there now over 10 years, who knows everything about them. Durban Deep, geez, I think the MD there has been there 15 years. And it's so measured, it's so progressive, whatever he says happens. And Durban Deep, and Pan-African's just about like that, very few surprises, and the surprises just ricochet off the thick armor that he's got on the company there. So, I think pleasing results from those two, very pleasing results. And they couldn't be more opposite, huh? One's just mining sand dumps all the time, and the other is mining more underground than open pit and is branched into Australia. He's lucky on the M&A. I thought he overpaid a little bit at the time, but the gold price has gone so much higher than what Quibus paid for it. Doesn't matter. Looks like a good move. It is a good move.
And just to close off with a reminder that you've given us, and that came from Kumba and what you were saying on iron ore, is that sometimes today's most fashionable and most attractive girl at the dance becomes the old hag in a little while, because lots more girls just like her get pushed into the lineup. It does appear as though that's happened with iron ore. Is there a risk of this happening with copper?
I believe there is, and I'm on a couple mining chat lines and websites. These guys, they'll go to the grave telling you copper's just going to keep going up. And I was at Robert Friedland's presentation at the Mining Indaba. He has been saying that nonstop for 10 years, and he's just proven right. So it's hard to argue with a lot of people that are very involved in that industry. They see numbers I don't, and the copper side mimics it. And we know the world's going to AI. We know the world needs more electricity. We know all the world wants to get first world standards. So you add to that the cost and time and effort to build a new mine. Copper could be the most popular girl here for a few years to come, Alec. I'm not cynical it's going to fall. I'm always cautious when thing is way outside its mean, way outside its standard deviation, like I was with gold. And I still don't want to invest in gold here, even though it's 5,000, it's down 10%. But copper, yes, I'm looking for assets that don't reflect this price, growth stories. And that's what Jubilee's in. And there's a few other copper producers that are doing the same thing. Yeah, copper can fall from 13 to 10. They're still going to make a ton of money. And it's not reflected in the price yet.
Orion hopefully is still in that time to continue purchasing category.
Very much, Alec. Yeah, very much. At 39.40 cents, I'm not afraid of buying here. It shot too quick to 46.47. That was people who'd followed the rights issue at 13. People had bought all those shares at the other rights issue at 17. Yeah, they made 300% on their money in 6 months. But you could see those weak sellers, those speculative buyers, people that and overweight, they were getting out of it in the 40s. And yeah, it came all the way down to 36, 37. But then the real buyers came in. And at this copper price, it's a giveaway down there in anything in the 30s. And 40 cents isn't too expensive, I don't believe. Not at all.
Well, there we have it. Our weekly injection of mining wisdom from Peter Major. He's with Modern Corporate Solutions, and I'm Alec Hogg from biznews.com.